It's him setting aside his personal pride and his party for the country, doing that in the best interest of the country. And that is what true patriotism looks like.
Welcome to Millennial, the home of pretend adulting and real talk about coconut trees. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
Pam couldn't make it this week. Unfortunately, she came down with COVID.
Man.
It was also her birthday on Friday. And I wonder, she said, I'm going to go slut it up all weekend. It's my birthday weekend. Screw it. I said, Pam, no, don't. No, there's danger everywhere. And then she got COVID. I wish she listened to me.
Oh, yeah, Andrew, you're definitely the most cautious amongst us. You're the one who's out here being social now. I don't know what you're talking to her about.
No, well, we hope she feels better soon. But luckily, we were planning on having a guest on this week. Friend of the show, Dr. Sarah Steelman. Welcome back to Millennial, Sarah.
Hello, it's good to be back. Feel free to just call me Sarah. You guys knowing me since I was like 14, calling me doctor is weird.
Oh,
Okay.
But we're just so honored to have a doctor on the podcast. We just have to I just want to say it.
Well, it also ups the credibility of the production here. So, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say it gives us major credibility for sure.
I'll use doctor every fourth time I address you just to keep reminding people, but not overdo it.
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
You inspired part of today's discussion. We're going to tackle the big news before we get to the main reason you're on. But a few weeks ago, Laura had mentioned in passing this trend of self-diagnosing through what you hear on TikTok. And then you posted in our Facebook group about it saying, thanks for bringing it up, Laura. As a therapist yourself, you see a lot of people self-diagnosing.
Yeah.
And we thought this is a huge thing that everybody does. We all self-diagnose. So let's get somebody on who could talk with us about the issue.
I was grateful that you brought up my personal soapbox. And so I brought it up in the Facebook group, and then here we are today talking about it. So dreams do come true.
Dreams do come true. Of course, we have to discuss the big news over the weekends.
Dreams do come true.
Yeah. Sarah's a big Disney fan, so this kind of, this is a little Disney tie-in here. So go ahead, Laura. You take the honors.
Wish upon a star. Joe Biden, very abruptly and at least unexpectedly from my perspective, just dropped his letter of resignation on Twitter at 2:37 p.m. on a Sunday, because why not? It was so reaffirming and really helped me settle in myself and feel okay, I wasn't a crazy person these last couple of weeks, and feeling like this had to be coming. But he also very quickly endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris, to take or to lead in this campaign in his stead. So Kamala Harris is running against Donald Trump this fall for the presidency. And I'm not going to lie, I'm still terrified, because we've never seen anything like this, but I also feel like politics has been in unprecedented territory for almost the last decade at this point. So it's really hard to know what to expect. And unfortunately, there's no historical precedent for us to even lean on here to get an idea of how it's going to go. But my thinking is, I love Joe Biden. I really do.
Yeah.
I think he was going to lose. I don't think that there was going to be a scenario in which he won in November. So I think we actually have a chance now, which gives me hope.
That's a word that we've heard a lot over the past couple of days. A lot of people are feeling hope for the first time in years. It is nerve-wracking, but it is also exciting to have some younger blood on the tickets. I was so excited to see this because I've been wanting this for a couple of weeks now, Biden to not seek re-election. I'm glad he seemingly was listening to the advice of people around him. And there's been some really good news thus far. I mean, Kamala has already raised a record-breaking amount of money, right?
Yeah, so she broke fundraising records by raking in $81 million in a 24-hour period after Biden announced her as his successor. So really incredible. And you also added here, Andrew, 100 million within 36 hours. So
Yes.
it's pretty remarkable. And I think that it shows that there's energy now. And I feel energized because there's just been so much rhetoric around the ages of these two candidates and the fact that obviously I would have voted for a potato if they ran it as the Democrat over Donald Trump. But I did feel this sense of fatigue, and like it really is time to pass the torch to the next generation, because we're all tired of being led by people who don't like really have a sense of what it's like to like grow up and be a young adult and then like a not so young adult anymore in this time. Like we're just facing challenges that really weren't on the table for them, and that's okay. But I think it's time. It was time for newer, younger leadership, and I'm just excited we got it. Like, I think I still feel a little surprised.
Yeah.
Like, am I dreaming? Because it really felt like he was digging his heels in and not wanting to step down. So I was really afraid that it was going to get too late.
Yeah.
And that, like, if he didn't do this soon, then we were just going to have to, like, grin and bear it and try our very best in November. I'm just excited that that's not what we're doing now. But I would really like for us to play a clip from Kamala's first speech after all of this news came out.
She's already kicking butt in front of the cameras at these campaign events.
You know, as many of you know, before I was elected as vice president, before I was elected as United States Senator, I was the elected Attorney General, as I've mentioned, of California. And before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
Yeah, that's going to get people going.
Yeah, she's killing it.
Sarah, where are you landing on the last few days? How are you feeling?
You know, it's very weird. We'll kind of get into this later too, but to introduce, I am mostly off social media, like in general. And so I don't see much news like day to day, but I like get some news from actual news sources. And also my sister works in Democratic politics and has for like 25 years. And so I knew that like I kept trying to call her and she couldn't answer the phone ever. And so I like figured things were happening. I didn't hear anything, but like I kind of felt rumblings of like stress and things happening. And obviously I know the climate even if I don't see everything right away. And so it's really palpable and kind of crazy how all of this like made sense, even if I didn't have any of the pieces like day to day through the internet, like telling me what was happening. But it's just like so in the air of the like how everyone engages societally right now. And so it didn't surprise me. I'm hopeful, but also, I don't know, I feel a little, I don't know if, I think disillusioned is like the best word, but I don't think it's actually the best word for this necessarily. But like, I think liberals and Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. And so I don't quite understand why it matters. As Laura said, I would vote for a potato as well. I don't care who's on the ticket. If it's against Trump, you vote for the Democratic candidate. You don't vote third party that's throwing your vote away. You vote for whoever is going to do it. And the president doesn't do a ton in general, like in government. And so it just feels like a lot of, like I'm hopeful that this actually does change, but it just feels like a lot of people that don't quite understand how the system works, trying to pretend like they know how the system works, and then feeling better because of that, like in mass. And so I don't know. I don't know how much this will lead into November, like people remembering this, because we didn't like Kamala in 2020. And so like, maybe will people remember that? And so I'm a little scared still, but overall I'm trying to be hopeful and see what happens and hope that we have a democracy after this.
Yeah. Well, the record-breaking fundraising certainly gives me hope. So many people are so excited about this that they're turning out and putting their money where their mouth is. I have not donated yet, but once Kamala is offering a coconut tree hat, you bet I will be donating at that time to get that hat. I, too, of course, am a never Trumper. And, of course, I would vote for the potato if that was our choice. But this excites me. I wasn't excited about Biden. I feel confident in Kamala that she's going to be on camera kicking butt all the time, that she'll go into a debate with Trump and just destroy him. I want to feel confident about my candidate, and I was not feeling that with Biden. So at the least, I think I just feel like I can rest easier knowing that somebody can take Trump on and just demolish him. That's what I think excites me. I'm like proud now at half of our ticket. We'll see what the other half is going to be.
Yeah. Instead of cringing, right? Like this last month, anytime Biden got on camera, I mean, I was physically clenching. Like I was sitting there and I just felt my muscles tightening and I was just preparing for the gaffe because I knew it was coming. So yeah, I don't feel that way with Kamala, but I think Sarah brings up a really good point. There's a lot of energy right now and that's really great, but we have to understand that Kamala, just like any other presidential candidate, is going to come with her own baggage, just like anyone does. It's not any more or less or better or worse than anyone else's, but there's going to be a spotlight on her in a lot of ways that wouldn't be done to other candidates just on the basis of who she is. And unfortunately, the bar is going to be higher for her in some cases. And it's not fair, but it's true. So, you know, when and if, because she's human, she stumbles during this campaign, it's going to be amplified. So yeah. I think it's just something to be aware of.
One thing that does give me hope right now is that the right is already scrambling. They've seemed to be caught flat-footed. They should have expected and braced for an announcement by now. I mean, over the weekends, they've had no good arguments about Kamala so far, and that will change, of course. They need a little more time to figure out their talking points. But there were complaints about Biden stepping down after the Republicans, spent so much money attacking him. And Trump was like, we should sue them for fraud. Like, really? Okay. Sean Hannity was complaining about Kamala's laugh. That's all they got right now. They don't have any coherent or solid arguments. And again, I know that will change, but I'm surprised they were caught so flat-footed. I would have expected they had some stuff ready to go.
I can't picture Kamala's laugh. Does she have a weird laugh?
No.
It's infectious. I don't think it's weird. Okay. I call my laugh weirder. It's just like
That's such an interesting thing to bring up then from them. So I was like, I feel like there are other notable things that you could say, but like that's not one of them.
No. But I mean, criticizing women for the way their laugh sounds is, I mean, that's like low-hanging fruit. They did it to Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Oh,
so it doesn't surprise me that it's happening again here.
People whose laughs should be criticized. Seth Rogen and Maria Menounos. That's it. And Andrew Sims. So you can criticize me
Maria
too.
Maria Menounos is a good one. Yes, that is
true. That's hers.
Yeah, every time I'm in the movies, I'm like, oh God, I like have such secondhand embarrassment after I hear that. I'm like, should I leave?
Yeah.
Honestly, that must be a good gig for her, though, because she's been doing it for a long time.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
They lean into it now because I went to the movies the other day and they included one of her laughs, and totally on purpose because they know everybody knows it by now.
Oh, my gosh.
Do you think Hillary Clinton is going to be just in the woods until November? Like, what's she got going on right now during this time?
Actually, she has a book coming out, so I think she's going to be busy with a book tour.
Yeah.
I saw on Instagram. Yeah.
She's also a really effective campaign surrogate, so I have a feeling she'll be doing some of that. To what extent they're going to have her public facing in that regard. I don't know, because they may not want the baggage of 2016 hanging over, the next time a woman is going up against Trump. So she may be more involved behind the scenes. Again, it's one of those things that's like, it's not fucking fair.
Yeah.
It is the reality of the situation.
She's a career politician, so I'm sure she is very used to compartmentalizing and like swallowing her personal feelings. But she probably wants to go to the woods at some point during this and just like have her own human emotions about it.
Sarah, I went to the woods for a weekend by myself like a month ago, and it was the best, most healing thing that I've done for myself in a long time. So really, we should all go to the woods.
Yeah.
Until November.
This is bittersweet to me that we're witnessing the end of an incredible political career. And when Biden addresses the nation Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to listen and I'm probably going to get emotional. Like, it's going to be sad. But it's also so amazing of him to have made this choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's him setting aside his personal pride and his party for the country, doing that in the best interest of the country. And that is what true patriotism looks like. I will say that I'm still pretty salty that he, his family, and the country were put through this for the last few weeks, because it's been exhausting. And I can't imagine what it's like to be the person living in that situation, or for his grandchildren, for example, to be watching him struggle that way. I really felt like he was on a number of occasions kind of served up to be humiliated. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't think he was being like a curmudgeonly fuck, because I'm sure that was part of it. I don't think that he wanted to step down, but I'm also I still feel like a little bit resentful, because I've been wondering if some hard truths about the signs and signals that he's giving off about the state of his cognitive acuity, and also like his status against Trump. I'm wondering how honestly those things were being conveyed to him.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad, because, I mean, the man is a lifelong dedicated public servant who has suffered tragedies that most people will never know. So do I support and agree with everything he's done in his 50 plus years of public service? Absolutely not. Really fucked us on student loans and not being able to discharge them in bankruptcy. But he's also done, I would say, way more good. So
yeah,
it's just rough. It's hard to see, but he did the right thing.
A couple other small items I wanted to address really quick. First of all, he made this announcement on National Ice Cream Day, which is just hilarious and a very dark Brandon move. I also want to say RIP to Let's Go Brandon t-shirts. Those are about to become irrelevant. And the thought of that finally being past us is just so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I have a question. So I brought to the podcast today my Biden-Harris yard sign. I'm wondering, should I cut off Biden and just leave Harris, or am I kind of like ruining the value of this thing?
I feel like this is like a Parks and Rec issue, like when Leslie Knope was running, and then she was like, recall Knope, ? Don't.
So you're saying I shouldn't cut off Biden on my yard sign?
Just get a sticker that says something else. I don't know what, maybe vote, but that's too simple. Like, it has to be something funnier than that, but cover Biden with a sticker.
Oh, okay. Decorate it with a bunch of coconut trees so that it's just a bunch of coconut trees on top of Harris. I swear to God, if they do not lean into the coconut tree stuff for their campaign merch, it's a huge missed opportunity.
What is the coconut tree stuff? Is this something that I missed not being on the internet?
Yes.
Okay.
You only know about coconut trees if you've been chronically online.
Yeah, honestly.
Okay, do I want to know, or am I better not knowing?
No, this is a good one. This is a good one, I think.
Do you want to just play the clip?
Everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
That's it. That's the viral moment. It's some nice remarks.
Yeah.
But it's
that's
just
good.
like, she's really pleased with her. She's laughing at her own joke. And this has been memed like crazy. People are remixing it. It's a whole thing on the internet.
Okay.
And people have
That is pretty good.
definitely taken it out of context where they'll remove the fact that like it was a story about something her mom used to say, and it'll just kick off with her being like, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?" and like cracking up at it. It's viral. It's a meme. It's all like also very positive. Like nobody's making fun of her for it in like a malicious way. I mean, I'm sure someone somewhere is, but in general, the prevailing narrative is that like it's quirky and a little awkward and funny.
I like that then. Yeah, so get coconut tree stickers and put that over Biden.
Okay, sounds good. I will work on that for my Biden-Harris lawn sign. Yeah, I didn't really want to cut it because it's like, this is a piece of political memorabilia, so I didn't want to ruin it. And don't get it twisted. I will not be posting any lawn signs out front. I don't need to identify myself as a Democrat.
Are you going to try to sell it? I feel like that's your move.
My modified version or the original version?
No, the original. Like, wait a few years until everyone's old campaign merch has like disintegrated.
My brother-in-law, for most of his adult life, has collected like very old like campaign merch. And like they have like a gallery wall of like shadow boxes with like old pins and stickers for like different presidentials and stuff. And so I know that some of that gets expensive. So definitely you could sell that in a few years.
All right. I will continue holding on to it. Yeah, I'll wait a few decades, then sell it. Well, any closing thoughts here before we move on?
Let's go.
Let's go.
LFG. Let's
fucking go.
Let's do it, Joe.
We did it, Joe. We did it.
Now you gotta sound like you've been sipping on margaritas or something before you say that, so you can be like, "We did it, Joe."
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was probably having mimosas. It was the morning, but you understand my point.
All right. Well, we will take a break to order some Kamala merchandise, hopefully with coconuts on them, and we will be right back. So, Sarah, like I said at the top of the episode, you were glad that Laura a few weeks ago had brought up self-diagnosing on TikTok. So we wanted to dive deeper into this today. But first, there are a couple things you wanted to say up front, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that it was clear. So I am a therapist, but I am not like here operating as trying to be like the overarching rule of like, this is how all therapists think, or this is like, applicable to everybody. I worked in therapy for like 12 to 15 years. And so a lot of this is like going to be my own personal experience of like working within this field, the changes over time, especially as, TikTok became a thing. It wasn't a thing at first. And so if any of my comments today don't apply to you, that's fine. Like some people in the Facebook group were talking about this, that they saw themselves represented through TikTok, or they learned to look for help. Like, I'm not trying to replace or diminish any of those stories, but I'm trying to talk about as a whole, like how I think that this trend is impacting mental health spaces, clients, impacting people with more legitimate like diagnosis issues, different problems getting the access to care that they need. And so if this doesn't apply to your individual story, that is fine. And if you have any questions or thoughts, like, this is not a replacement for therapy at all for anyone. So there are resources. I'm going to talk a lot about different places to find therapeutic help. And so if something does seem like it could be wrong, definitely go to a therapist, try and find professional help in order to see what is going on with you. You can use psychologytoday.com. That's a pretty good resource to find therapists, or you can contact your insurance provider to get different lists of finding providers. And so don't just listen to me and think that this is therapy. It's my disclaimer.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that. And actually, one thing I'm excited to talk about today is the best ways to find a therapist. So we'll get into that later, though. So as a professional, what are the consequences of self-diagnosing through TikTok, whatever else, as you see them?
To start, so my personal approach to therapy. And this is influenced by my PhD program. I was trained in queer theory. And so a lot of queer theory, when it talks about different like power structures, it discusses how like identity issues, most of it was done with like LGBT stuff. That's kind of the time it was written. But like Foucault said, like having pride in like LGBT identities is in part like a hand of the oppression. And so basically like the majority people give you a little play box, like sandbox to play in. And if you play in that sandbox and have pride in that sandbox, it's still a sandbox. And like you could have more than that. Like there's a whole, playground for you. And so whenever I work with clients, and this has been, with every issue that I work with, not just with ADHD or things that people want to self-diagnose through social media, but I try to have them see diagnosis for what it is, which is a tool. It is also a tool created by oppressive structures. It is mostly done for insurance. It is a gatekeeping mechanism. There are lots of problems with it. There are good things with diagnosis. Some people do find, just like LGBT, there's pride in that. And like that is in part oppression, but also very useful. Like you can't not exist in the soup of society. And so in a maybe ideal world, we don't have these things, but we don't live in an ideal world. And so diagnosis is definitely needed, but a lot of overemphasis on diagnosis in general, I think is a problem. And it's trying to have these things be more than just tools that you use to get what you need from them, but more things that are like very like inherently true about someone, which for a lot of people causes emotional and mental distress. And so I find that a lot of times this diagnosis process leads for people to think a lot worse about themselves and their situations than they should otherwise.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, because I have to imagine there's a lot of comparison that happens when people are getting this sort of advice online where like if 4 out of the 5 things that they described as being like the top indicators for ADHD or autism are not things that I have, does that invalidate me in the diagnosis I've already received? Or does it invalidate me in wanting to seek a diagnosis? Or, flip the script and it's the alternate version of that where it's like, I meet everything on this list, so I must have this diagnosis. And, all of the, unfortunately, like social downsides that can come with that and with identifying with it. Is that what you're saying, Sarah?
Yeah. And a lot of things that I'll say to clients is like, we live full time, like in our own selves. And so many times when people have distress or like problems that they see, diagnostic criteria, their image of other people is like, well, this person's just like doing it themselves and like they're great. And they don't see that like people are doing a lot of work to like keep up their mental health. Like no one is just like naturally doing this shit. And so helping people see that like doing well in therapy, as I describe it to clients and anyone who will listen to me, is not about trying to feel better. It's about trying to learn tools to have sustainable care of yourself, to know what to do when, to know that when you feel bad, it won't last forever, to know that like all of these things will shift, to not be emotionally reactive, but like you should feel bad when things are bad and when things aren't going well. And you should not try to just like have every day seem like, I don't know, like a productivity montage that you would see like in a movie or a show. Everyone learns skills and engages in it. Some people fall off the wagon occasionally, other people don't, and different times. And so it's just trying to remember that everyone is doing work that you're just not seeing when you are viewing them.
Yeah.
And you see yourself as, a problem compared to the rest of the world.
And I think I was saying this recently, social media is like a highlight reel. You only see the good stuff. So it looks like everybody's doing great all the time when really that is not the case. So that is a great reminder to just sort of sit in your feelings too. Why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
What can I do about it if I need to change something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that most people, I think both of you on this panel, have you guys seen Inside Out too?
Oh, yeah.
I have not. I'm in the minority on this. I know I need to watch it.
Yeah, you should. I think that Inside Out has always been like the gift that keeps on giving for therapists and all of the world. But I think this was such a good time because the amount of people that I see with anxiety as their main issue being brought up is astronomical after COVID. And it makes sense. Like, I'm sure that like during the like COVID quarantine, I would talk to clients about how I'm pretty sure that like longitudinal data will show a lot of like these like marked like neuroscience changes that happen in to everyone at once. Like there was a whole bunch of memory issues. It also made a lot more sense to have anxiety. Like anxiety is an evolutionarily useful response. And so of course you're going to have it. There's no like removing it from your system. Like that's not how we as humans operate. And so I think that it was like such a good time in the world to release like, here's how like anxiety works. Here's how it lies to you. Here's how you soothe it. You don't remove it. You just like get it a massage chair.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I think that's a lesson several of us in like the show family have had to learn. I know I certainly have. But Sarah, how often would you say that people are coming in with a self-diagnosis that they say either comes from TikTok or some other online platform?
Literally every single day that I see clients. And like whenever I get new clients, it is always a discussion. I would say at most in, 10 or let's say in 100 clients, 100 new clients that I would have in the last like 2 or so years, I maybe have had 5 that have not brought up ADHD or autism as a self-diagnosis through TikTok. And so this is happening constantly for all therapists across time. And it has been for about a year and a half, 2 years at minimum, I would say. And so this is part of why I made that Facebook post after you brought it up, Laura, because it's something that like happens so repeatedly in therapy that people bring it up.
Yeah. And like I mentioned when I brought it up, the whole reason I brought it up was because of how common it's becoming for people to just casually not only self-diagnose, but like openly do so. Like the number of people who just anecdotally in my life, I've heard casually be like, oh, like I'm autistic. TikTok told me so. And it's like, I mean, listen, I'm not a professional. I'm not going to tell you you are or you aren't, but it's a little bit alarming. Like it definitely reminds me of a lot of the other types of trends that can happen on social where like my favorite one, Pam and I have talked about this, and this might actually be something that we chat about later medically, but there's this trend going around right now that's like, you're not fat, you just have high cortisol. And it's like, stop trying to like manufacture these blanket solutions for people if you are not like, you're not in the position to be doing it.
Yeah. And I think part of the issue with this, and it leads to kind of the mass effect of like social media influence, is a lot of people don't understand like how diagnosis works. And it's kind of like a horoscope if you just take a individual criteria. And so diagnosis, like you have the DSM, I'm pointing because it's behind me. So like the DSM lists like how many different criteria you need and how many different facets of your life over how long amount of time. And so a quick example of this is if a kid is having an issue, but their issue only exists at school, and then when they're at home, it's not an issue, it's not a diagnosis. There's an issue with trying to figure out what barriers are happening at school. Oftentimes it's like, trying to figure out, is there like a motivation issue? Is there another like structural barrier happening at school, not at home? But if you are able to engage differently and like not have the same criteria affect you in one place versus another, it does change whether or not you are eligible for the diagnosis. And so sometimes when I'm trying to talk to clients through this for different diagnoses, I'll ask them like, if right now you like were offered, like a friend came to you and you were able to like go on a trip, like go to Disney World, go to, Paris, like go somewhere, how would you react? Like, how would you do it? Because a lot of times they're talking about, oh, I can't like get up and like clean my room, or I'm just not able to get this paperwork done or go to the post office. And it's like, okay, well, if you had a really fun thing, like if you were told, you went to Barnes and Noble right now that like your favorite author was there, something that people care about, not just nerds. But that's basically kind of how you talk through it with them, is like, if in a good situation you'd be able to do this, how can we get you to do it when it's not a good situation?
You had told us that ADHD and autism are the most common conditions people come in with having self-diagnosed. One topic that came up, one of our listeners addressed, was an issue that you agree with, which is that the misdiagnoses have led to actually medication shortages. Is that right?
Yeah. So I can't touch too much on like the supply chain issues because I don't work within medication, but like from my understanding, there are a lot of legitimate reasons why there is more diagnosis now of ADHD and autism than there have been before. One of the primary reasons is because we understand how presentation works within girls, which is something that most medicine doesn't understand, that girls exist. And so they don't factor that in. And this has always been an issue within like medical school, medical issues, like how heart attack symptoms are different, but same thing's true with autism and ADHD diagnosis presentations. And so in a lot of these spaces, like it's hard to deduce because there is such an influx of people needing or like asking for this care because of TikTok and because of social media, that even though there is some legitimacy for people that follow this stuff to know, like, well, no, there's more diagnoses happening that are valid at this time. It's like really convoluted and hard to figure that out. It actually felt similar to me as like, I mean, I work in trans healthcare mostly, and there's a lot more people that would identify as trans nowadays. There are very clear reasons that we can kind of track for that. But there are people that kind of have rhetoric of like, rapid onset gender dysphoria is kind of the main catch-all of like, oh, your friends are all doing it, so that's why you're trans. And so like, this isn't, a new thing that occurs within diagnosis or within like something that feels new that the youngins are doing. But it really messes with access to care. And so that's part of the struggle that people with ADHD that do require medication, that have required medication for a while, or seeking medication, that it's just like crowding the space and it's hard to make your way through the noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking as someone who takes ADD medication, it's very frustrating. I can't tell you the number of times I've had to go without for weeks at a time because I just couldn't get it. No local pharmacies had it. It was all back ordered. And I mean, some of that, I don't even think it's only something we can attribute to the influx in people. There's also been like a reduction in these companies producing the amount of drugs to meet the demand that they need to meet. And that's having an effect too. It's rough.
Anecdotally, I have a friend here who very much needs ADHD medication, and he's been struggling as well. And he's been getting it from these kind of like weird providers and been getting different types of ADHD medication because it is so hard to get the meds that he needs. But also, I saw an article from a tech site a few months ago, I guess at this point, pointing out that there are now people on like sites like, it might not be Fiverr, but it's some place where you can hire somebody to go out and try to find ADHD medicine for you.
Wow.
And they'll go and call up pharmacies all over the country to try and find some available for you. Mm-hmm. But that's the point where it's at. Like, people are outsourcing finding ADHD medication.
Yeah. That's, a huge problem. And I think, there's a lot of things to be fearful of, not, I feel like I'm just in a constant state of fear with where the world is. Like, it's been very clear for the past, especially year, that there are a lot of changes in health insurance. There's a lot of things to just try and just catch you off guard as a provider. There's a bill that was passed a while ago in Nevada called the No Surprise Act, which is trying to allow for like you not to have a hidden bill come up, or like you're not like an insurance of like you were told that your insurance is approved and then it's not approved, different things like that, which happens in medicine. Like, if we decided right now to go to a doctor, you're basically just like gambling of like, how much is this going to cost? Could be $5, could be $150, could be a lot more than that. And so, but like I have had so many issues with clients that like their insurance is approved. I go through all the process necessary. Then I see them for a few months and insurance decides not to pay. Or like there's a random issue that they're like, this, like, we don't want to accept it because of this reason. And like this normally coincides with like difficulties with authorization. I think there's actually a John Oliver about this, about like prior authorization and like the rampant problems with that. And so the privatization and like the capitalism of healthcare has always been a problem and is getting worse, like actively every day. And so I am not surprised at all if that in part is, contributing to the ADHD medication shortages. Like I said, I don't have any insider knowledge of that, so I don't work in medication, but like if you suddenly came to me with information about that, I'd be like, that makes sense.
Sarah, do you think TikTok should ever be taken seriously on these topics?
No. I would love if TikTok just ceased to exist from the world.
How dare you?
I know. I understand. Like, as someone, I'm one of those heroes of the internet who has gotten off the internet. Like, you remember the people that on Facebook or Instagram or whatever back in the day were like, I'm going to take like a month leave and like, look at me doing this for myself. And it's like, wow, what a hero.
Yeah.
As someone personally who has done that, I understand entirely why it is hard. It took me so long to figure out what would work. I made it so difficult to access. I removed all the apps from my phone. I set app limits still. I had to log in on Safari and then have the button to allow me to have 15 minutes, and I still did it. Like, everything I tried for a good period of time was so difficult because you got a slot machine in your pocket. Like, it is psychologically hijacking people, and it works fantastically. And so I know it's not an easy task. I don't try and treat it like it is. But the only positives I really see from TikTok is things that shouldn't be happening to begin with. Like, we should experience boredom. We should be talking to people more. We should be dealing with uncomfortable feelings and not just using like this modern pacifier to soothe them. And so I think TikTok is fun. I think there's lots of fun creativity. I don't want to take that away from people. I've definitely loved, seeing memes and stuff online. But yeah, in terms of like a problem that I think exists, and if TikTok didn't exist in the world, I think the world would categorically be a lot better. So no, I don't think you should look at TikTok as your personal doctor.
So
ever.
What tips would you have for people who are kind of, maybe this is the only resource they have, right? Unfortunately, the state of healthcare in this country is not great. A lot of people don't have the access they would need to get a proper diagnosis. So do you have any tips for people for reading between the lines and kind of getting an idea of whether what they're hearing is accurate or not?
Yeah, I think I have some. So first of all, I think that it seems a lot harder than it is to like find therapists. It's complicated, but once you take a few minutes to kind of do some research, I don't think it's actually that complicated. Like, I've helped talk a lot of people through this before. And so crash course on like kind of what you're looking for. If you're trying to find a therapist, these are people that after their name would have the letters like LMFT, LCPC or CPC, LCSW. All of those letters, what that signifies is that they are a licensed individual and they are within, they have a master's degree in those different specializations. It doesn't totally matter to you, like what different things you're trained in. It just like is kind of the theoretical underframe of like how you see the world, see problems, kind of work through different things. But being licensed, what that means for them is that they've finished their internship. And so that leads to like the next thing. If you see anyone that has an intern after their name, they might have some of those letters, but then it says intern or it says the letter I. Some people have like associate, depends on the state. So you can like look up in your state what kind of the legal reasons and like notators there are. Those people have finished school, unless it specifically says student intern, but they're in the middle between their hours. So they have a supervisor that they see every week at minimum. They need to get approximately 3,000 hours. It usually takes about 3 years after you graduate in order to get fully licensed. There's a lot of pros and cons to see a license versus an intern. So like, you don't have to worry too much. Like, if you find someone that you like and they're listed as an intern, it's not that they're like shitty. There's actually a lot of research that shows that they're going to be more empathetic to you than a lot of licensed people. I can definitely attest to that. Like I do supervision for only one intern right now, but every time I talk to her, I'm like, oh man, you're not jaded, huh? Like this is beautiful and lovely. And so there's some like really good things that you can get from interns that you might not get from licensed people. So you're not like getting just a cheaper experience. But these people are going to do talk therapy with you. So they're going to teach you tools, teach you how to engage in all these different things. That's what you're looking for there. And that's what you're going to be getting. If you're trying to figure out just do you have autism or do you have ADHD, one of the best places for you to do that is to find a psychologist. These are people that either have PhDs or PsyDs, and they are trained to do psychological testing. Psychological testing can tell you if you have autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorder issues, different things like that. It's like, a regimented testing process that is done over a period of time. So it's kind of hard to get in, especially during school year time. So a lot of students will try and get in. So wait lists can be long. That's where you're going to want to look if you want like a formalized diagnosis. The therapists that you'll find, most of them will probably have a semester of diagnosis under their belt. Insurance makes you diagnose, but like between you and me, I wouldn't trust many therapist diagnosis. Even if you have like a clinical diagnosis, like sometimes all that means is like the therapists need to put something down for them to get paid. So I usually gravitate to like ones that are very changeable, kind of the bread and butter. You have anxiety, you have adjustment disorder. For me working in trans issues, you have gender dysphoria. But diagnosis of certain issues take more training, and so might not be in the scope of practice for therapists. If you want medication, you're going to try and find a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is the one that has the MD, that they're able to prescribe medication, and they're trained to know how to do that.
Thank you for breaking down the differences. Something also I did want to mention is it's just really important for everybody to practice media literacy. And we bring this up from time to time on the podcast. I took a media literacy class in college. I think it was one of the most important classes that I took. And basically, media literacy is just being able to look at a story or look at a TikTok or look at something and being able to decipher whether this information that you're consuming is accurate or not, truthful or not, what are the sources, all of that. And the reason I bring this up here is because a couple months ago, I saw this report from Bloomberg. There's a whole business in hiring fake podcasters or experts on a subject matter to talk authoritatively on a subject. For example, Bloomberg profiled one actor who gets paid $195 for each video he records in a studio that looks like it's a podcast studio. So he's in his fake podcast studio talking about, let's say it's a product, like it's, some ADHD medicine or something like that. They are hired to do that because it's cheaper than this company paying for a traditional advertisement. And then this company will go and release this fake podcaster's video onto social media. And then because it looks like it's a podcaster speaking about this product, it looks like he knows what he's talking about. He's on a podcast. He must know what he's talking about. This one person makes $9,000 to $16,000 a month doing this bullshit. Laura,
Wow.
We made a big mistake.
I know. Why are we trying so hard?
But that's something you got to be mindful of. You see this all the time on TikTok. You see these podcast clips, air quotes, that might not be from a podcast at all, except for these clips, of course.
Cue to Chloe.
Right. Right.
Clip that.
Yeah, no, it's terrifying. And like, it's a business. And so it's difficult where if there's room for something to grow and for there to be money there, they're going to figure out a way to do that. And so like, this was inevitable. Like if you kind of look at the history of the internet, but that's bad. Sometimes, as a Disney fan, sometimes I think about WALL-E and how ahead of its time it was and like how horrifying it is. Like literally weekly, I'll just be like, wow, this is WALL-E. Like we're on the way to like, no one talks to anyone. You like are doing all these things that you're told are good, but like it's going to destroy the earth. And I just get very scared after that. And I'm like, wow, we're going to just fall straight into this, aren't we?
Yeah. And in fact, I want to talk about this idea of being chronically online. It's a phrase I'm thinking about a lot lately. But first, we're going to step outside for a quick breather and we'll be right back. A phrase I've been thinking about a lot over the last 6 to 12 months is, and I brought it up earlier, chronically online. People spend so much time online, their minds just get warped. It happens to everybody. I'm not saying this is like a left or right thing, but you spend so much time online, you start believing like everything that you're seeing online is true, or that's what the general public thinks outside of this internet bubble you're in. And then you get outside and it's like, oh, okay, people don't have these strong opinions nonstop, and you can share an opinion without being attacked in person. It's like, it's gotten so bad, and it has warped my mind too. I'm afraid to bring up certain things in public, but then I do, and I don't get canceled, and I'm like, oh, wow, okay, cool. People aren't gonna pick a fight with me over every little opinion of mine.
Yeah, not to like dig too much into this because I don't want to, but as the example, I brought up during like the hashing it out portion. So I was raised Jewish, and most of my like friends, family members are Jewish. And there was a lot of discussion, like as this stuff started with Israel, about recognizing like the importance of going to like in-person spaces, because there was at first so much fear, but like most people when they started doing that, like found more support and more safe spaces to communicate. Like it wasn't just as quickly condemned, because people are nice in person. Like humans aren't as bad as we are when we're online, and like we can have differences of opinions. Like you don't have to be in spaces where everyone agrees with you, but like if someone's in front of you, you're more than likely, unless you're a real shitty person, not gonna like yell at them or be like, you're an idiot for thinking this. You might think that to yourself, but like people are a lot more pleasant and able to engage in conversations, especially if you practice this too. Like there's so much to social skills that just take rehearsal. That's another thing that I'll talk about in therapy a lot with clients, is you can get really in your head about like, you know, no one is going to understand me, or like, this is such a huge problem or whatever. And it's just like, well, yeah, like if you don't have room of like examples, sometimes I'll talk about it as like a horror movie, like monster or villain. Like if you're watching a horror movie, they'll have it as like, you know, tricks with the camera, or like you'll hear sounds. They'll like show you glimpses, but they never like show you what the monster looks like. And that kind of like heightens your fear of it. But then most horror movies that show you the monster or the villain, you're like, oh, it's really bad CGI. Or like, that isn't as scary as I thought it was. Like, it's never scarier when it's in your face. And that's why you need to challenge your anxiety, and you need to face these things in person, because then there's less room for your anxiety to build up all these monsters. Because you're like, oh, yeah, talking on the phone is really scary. But last time I talked on the phone, no one cared about this. No one like, you know, said I was so stupid in how I talk. And so it's easier for me to like call people now, and just like build on those successes.
Yeah. I'll say, and I think, Laura, you'll understand where I'm coming from. There have been times where things will get heated in, let's say, our podcast Slack, business Slack. You know, we're talking biz, and, you know, the keyboard warrior in you comes out. I'll speak for myself. I can get a little salty over Slack sometimes. But if that were to happen over the phone, it would be a completely different story. I'm not saying you're a fucking idiot, Laura. Why the hell do I work with you? I've never said that.
To be clear, he's never said that to me.
I think salty over Slack sounds like a great like t-shirt to make.
Right.
Only salty on Slack. Yeah, Pam's not here this week because I hurt her feeling. She actually doesn't have COVID. I just was so mean to her on Slack.
Yeah, you were just salty to her on Slack, so she's not here. I get it.
She did what Biden did and faked getting COVID to get out of the episode this
Everything.
week. Yeah, Biden was like, I have COVID. A week later, you know what? I'm out.
Yeah,
just as big of responsibilities Pam has. Yeah.
Yeah, yep.
She does. She carries the show.
Yeah, and it's a lot of things that like, you know, going back to being salty on Slack, like there is differences of how you should talk to people that like are, again, like very like neuroscience. Like we're mammals. We behave in certain ways for reasons. And so asynchronous communication, so anything that's not in time with like, you know, a phone call, a FaceTime, an in-person conversation, that would be synchronous. So asynchronous would be a text message, an email, Slack, any of those things. You shouldn't use that for like vulnerable or really personal conversations in general, because like our brains don't interpret that the same way. And this is true if you are like upset with someone, but also like if you're vulnerable. Like I'll have so many conversations with clients where they're like, I was really hurt. And so I posted on Twitter that I was upset, and then no one said anything to me. And then I felt worse. And I'm like, you posted publicly on Twitter that instead of texting or calling a friend and like asking for support. Like you have to like know the spaces to like be a human and like how humans will reach out. And like we all, I think, deep down, like want to help each other if we're caught in the right way and in the right time. And so, yeah, they're not gonna be salty to you in person, only on Slack.
Yeah.
I really want to get Andrew that shirt.
Yeah.
Sarah, I know we've touched on this a little bit throughout the discussion, but what are the holes in the mental health care system that need to be addressed by the country?
I'll start with one that I think sounds really good when people say it, which is like everyone should be in therapy. Not everyone should be in therapy. Like therapy is used as a social safety net and a band-aid. Like there are times in which therapy is useful and times in which like you don't need it. My goal in therapy is always to not have the clients anymore. And so many times if I have clients that are just coming in to vent about things or complain about so and so, or, you know, have a space to talk, I'll recommend how to socialize more, how to build up their social network, because you should never have your main place to like communicate your frustrations be once a week at like most. And so it's okay to vent, it's okay to like be frustrated, but building intimacy, like having connections to people, that's useful. And like being able to talk to friends about things, also setting boundaries of like, you can't talk to me about this. All those things are really good. And so therapy can be helpful for a lot of individuals if they need to build those tools, if there are, you know, traumas to work through, or, you know, they just aren't in a place where they have that. But like, I'm not going to fix poverty. And many times I'm asked to, like, and I don't know what to do then. Like, it's extremely difficult to be told that, like, there is a problem and I see the problem. I see the structural or systemic issues to the problem. But the client that I have is not the one who has it. And this happens a lot because I work with a lot of marginalized individuals. Like, this is something that we know a lot through like LGBT and like trans literature, is that most people that are marginalized come to therapy because of a structural issue that like isn't theirs. That's also true of, you know, lots of other things. Like we usually go to therapy because our parents didn't, or because our partner won't, or someone in our life won't. And therapy isn't going to help with that. It's going to maybe teach you how to cope better. But after you're taught how to cope better, then you're both just sitting and being like, yeah, I'm sorry that this sucks around you, but like you did all you could. You used your agencies in the ways that you could. And like that, it kind of sucks for when that happens to different clients. And also like the amount of time that you should be in therapy, how to do different therapy, all of these different things, it's really versatile. And so not every therapist is going to work for every person or every issue. You might have a therapist that you love that helps you with one thing, and then something else happens that you want someone else. I actually have a client right now that I've seen for like 4 years for a lot of like gender dysphoria issues. And then recently they were like, I really want to work on like OCD treatment. And I was like, well, that's not my scope. And it's like, we can definitely still talk and like we can figure out treatment coordination, but like, here's how to find a specialist. And then we spent a long time helping them find a specialist. And so therapy is not a one size fits all, and not everyone needs it. And not every issue requires the same treatment or any treatment.
That's so interesting.
If I didn't know you, I would want you as my therapist, because some of the things that you're saying are so refreshing.
I
like
know.
your goal, I'm paraphrasing, but your goal is to not have to continue seeing the person, in that you want them to get better to the point where they don't need your services anymore. I love that, because I sometimes fear that some therapists don't feel that way.
Yeah, we're not financially incentivized to feel that way. And sometimes I'll say that directly to my clients too, where I'm like if I didn't want to like be ethical, there are so many ways that I could like be ethical in terms of like the letters of the law of ethics, where I just don't feel good about that. Like, I usually don't see clients weekly because I don't think that that's as helpful. I usually like every other week. This for me personally, where I want clients to feel the rhythm of like, oh, I like saw you on Monday, and then on Wednesday I thought like I had this huge issue and I want to talk to you about it right away, but then I didn't talk to you, and then they see me the like 2 weeks Monday from then, and they're like, oh, I forgot what happened. Because then you notice like, oh, when you're a person in the world, emotions happen to you. And then you don't remember them if you don't like hold on to them or harp on it. And so sometimes I'll also point that out. Like if I am seeing someone weekly or something happens right before they see me, of like, would you be talking about this if I didn't see you right now after it happened? Like if I saw you next week when it happened. But
That's such a good point.
yeah, and insurance, like therapists aren't paid a ton. There's a lot of upkeep of licensure payments. Like it's a lot of money in taxes. Almost every therapist that you'll see is a 1099 employee, unless they like work for CPS or like the jail system or a school. And so it's a lot. It's a good career, but it is not what you think it would be. And so there's a lot of incentive in order to be able to do the work that you do to try and keep clients on. Like that makes sense structurally because it's made like a business. And so therapists, I don't think maliciously ever. I mean, maybe some are, but mostly they have to think about lots of different things at once. And it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, you still need to come in. There's still things to work on here, and I can keep seeing you. You feel good with it. I feel good with it. But for me, it feels like helping them with like a crutch. And I don't like doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we should probably start winding this down, but I do have one more question for you. You mentioned at the top of this how to find providers. You mentioned psychologytoday.com. You mentioned contacting insurance for referral lists. Also, Googling, just finding private practice therapists. Don't Google your issue.
Yeah.
Google finding private practice therapists in your area and their websites. One thing that always makes me nervous is spending time looking for a therapist, getting involved with them, laying yourself bare to this person, and then it doesn't work out. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of mental expenditure. So I wanted to know, what do you recommend for people who might be looking for a therapist right now? How much time should we give this therapist before deciding we should move on? Do you have tips for like finding the best one for you, hopefully?
Yeah. So in general, therapy should feel a little like a stretch. And so think of like if you were, weight training, and Andrew, you're more of a gym boy than me. And so
it's true.
Yeah. So if I say something that's silly, then you can correct it. But like if you are, weight training and it feels like nothing, you're able to like get all your reps and it feels like, no harm, no foul. You're not exercising your muscle. Like you should feel some strain, not the entire time that you're like using that weight, but towards the end of like, your rep session or whatever the gym bros call it. And so that's what therapy should feel like. It should feel like a strain of your muscle, that you should feel safe. You should feel like you didn't break anything. And so in general, I recommend like give your therapist 2 or 3 times. It's also perfectly fine to tell your therapist that you're shopping for a therapist. If you're using insurance, one thing to note is that you can't see therapists on the same day, but oftentimes, and like let your therapist know, because different insurances have quotas of like, these are the number of sessions before you have to submit for a prior auth. And so if you don't tell your therapist that you're seeing someone else or you have in the past, you could run into issues there. I have definitely had that, but like in general, it's fine. I have clients all the time that come to me and are like, oh, I'm shopping around. I'm like, cool, great. That sounds good. And it's after you give like 2 or 3 sessions, see how you feel. You also don't need to like bare your soul. I think that's this is my approach to therapy. Not everyone is like this. Like there is definitely good, valid, great therapists that don't behave this way. But for me, what we are trying to do is work through patterns and like work through like structural systemic issues within your problems of your life. And so I don't need to know every bad thing that's happened to you. I actually have a lot of clients will be like, oh, like I know there's like a ton more to get into. I'm like, I actually don't need to hear anymore. Like I know what's happening. And I have done this for a while. I'm usually pretty correct. Like after 10, 15, 20 minutes talking to a client, I kind of know where we're going to be in 10 sessions from now, or if they won't be with me for 10 sessions. And so it does not take long for me to have a therapeutic plan of what's going to go on and like what you're working towards and how to help you with that. And so you don't need to feel like you have to trauma dump on your therapist. There's things that are important. Make sure to say that, but like write things down, have your own questions. I always make sure that I have plenty of time to be like, do you have any questions for me? Any questions about how I operate? Any questions about whatever? And then you can bring up anything. If you've had another therapist who, sometimes I'll have clients that like had a therapist that they really loved and then like they couldn't see anymore because they moved or insurance, something like that. And so I'll ask them about that, or they'll tell me like, yeah, I really liked when this therapist challenged me, or when this therapist, called me on this or did this type of approach. And then I'll kind of make note of that and I'll know if that sounds like me or doesn't sound like me. But it's kind of like dating more than just like trauma dumping or needing to share every content that you would want to bring up in therapy. They'll need to know that eventually. But if you're, don't want to bring that up, just have some questions, have some ideas of like what you think you want fixed. A lot of times therapists are trained with like the miracle question. A lot of masters talk about that, which is like, if tomorrow everything was better, what would it look like? And so know that for yourself. Like, how would your life be? How would you know that you're done with therapy? And if you have those things, it'll kind of guide you through questions to ask a therapist and know a little bit more about what you're shopping for and what type of style is going to feel good for you. And sometimes the style that you like isn't what you think you would like. I'm a pretty challenging therapist, and I think it works well for a lot of clients. It does not work well for everyone, though. And so that's okay. Like, being a good therapist for some means that you're not for others. And so it is also absolutely fine if you have a therapist and you're like, I don't want to come back here. Part of therapy is working actively through like healthy communication with the therapist. And so that's therapeutic in itself, is for you to say, I'd rather not see you. And the therapist hopefully handles themselves well. And it's like, that sounds fine. How can I help you with referrals, or what would you like to do from here? And then you had a good conversation, and it helps you have a better conversation next time and assert yourself.
I love
That's awesome.
that.
Yeah.
I
Really
appreciate
good tips.
that, because I know I mentioned my therapist earlier. She is a straight shooter like that. Like, and I love it. I love for someone to be direct with me.
Yeah.
It's so helpful, because sometimes it can be really easy to get stuck in your head and overcomplicate things that don't need to be.
Yeah. That's how I usually feel in therapy, which is kind of what developed my style. Like, I've gone to lots of therapists before, and whenever I feel like I have a space to vent, or I feel just like, oh, that's real hard for you, I always leave and I'm like, okay, like, now what? Like, I felt good for that time, but like, what do I do until next week when I get this?
Right.
And so it kind of led me to be more challenging and like make people work out well, but hopefully they get to a place that is more sustainable during the week and like help themselves feel better, even if they don't feel good for that, 50-minute time period.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, your past, current, and future clients are lucky to have you. Thanks for sharing all of this today. Do you have any plugs for the audience? Anything you would like to promote?
I mean, I don't have anything to promote. I would like to promote for people to get off TikTok, if that's an appropriate plug.
Fair enough.
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, just understand if you're engaging in junk food, that it is junk food. And like, junk food is great, but not all the time.
Yep.
And so like, use sparingly the vices that you have, but it's okay to have vices. I kind of am more facetious when I say get off TikTok, even though
well,
I think it is helpful.
Maybe the more approachable statement there is spend less time on TikTok. Try to spend less time on TikTok.
Touch grass.
Touch grass. Going cold turkey on TikTok is a tall order for our audience. Trust me, they're all addicted to TikTok. We know it. We know it very well.
Set app limits. That's a great start. Help get insight into how often you're reaching for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I recommended this product, and I'm not saying you have to buy this, but I bought this product and I recommended it a couple of months ago, called Brick, and it's this physical device, and you tap your phone to it and it locks all the apps that you want, and then I cannot access those apps until I re-tap my phone on the Brick, and it's got a magnet built in, so it just sits on my fridge. But what's great about it is I leave the house, I can't be tempted to type in a passcode to unlock my apps. There are workarounds, but I abide by the Brick rules and all that. And I just love that physical boundary that it sets up. Mm-hmm. So,
there's
solutions out there.
Physical boundaries are great. And like, You do not have to ever get to a point where life is just swimmingly, you're able to do all the healthy things. Sometimes we just have to like try and force ourselves in physical boundaries and like trying to aid yourself of knowing what things cause you hiccups and do what you can to mitigate those is the job everyone's doing every single day.
Shit happens.
Yeah. People get salty on Slack.
Yeah.
Yes, salty on Slack. Maybe the episode title.
Honestly, that's your new like username for everything, Andrew.
I'll just
You should
change
just
my
be
name on there. As
Salty on
Slack.
Slack, on Threads, on Twitter.
Yeah. The creator of The Sims, salty on Slack.
Yes. Well, coming up in After Dark, we're going to somewhat continue this discussion. Pam planned out After Dark. She found this article about TikTok's bad health hacks, and we thought this would tie in nicely. So we'll talk about the bad health hacks that we've seen on TikTok and the motivations behind these health hacks and just some of the more ridiculous ones that we've seen, like dousing your body in beer for a better tan. So that
great.
and more will be coming up in After Dark this week.
After Dark is part of Mega Millennial, which you get every week when you're a patron or Apple Podcast subscriber. Plus, it is ad-free. Visit patreon.com/millennial to pledge today. Spotify users will find a banner at the top of our show page, or Apple Podcast users can tap into the show and subscribe.
And we have other Patreon benefits like live stream access. People are tuned in right now, listening live. Our monthly Zoom hangouts. We have a new physical gift every year. The new physical gift is coming soon. We have samples. We love them. We're ready to go. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yes. And more benefits at patreon.com/millennial.
I'm a planner right next to me.
Isn't that planner the best?
It's so good.
Time for recommendations. And in light of the big news that we discussed at the top of today's episode, I want to recommend Veep, which, Laura, I believe you've been watching recently.
Yeah.
Great timing for you. Honestly, I had forgotten that she ends up running for president. And so this is just a perfect show to watch right now. And it's so funny. I've been seeing a lot of clips tying it to Kamala in the last couple of days. So please watch Veep. It's you'll get many laughs out of it.
Might also cry a little bit because it's too true. I think that's the thing about that show is you're like, oh, like it's
not
not that big of a stretch.
Pill to swallow during the Trump years, but now that we're seeing a Veep that we like run for president, it might be fun to watch again. Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe. I want to recommend a game called, it's not a new game at all, but it's called Zero Escape, the Nonary Games. This is actually, it's got 3 games within it. I'm playing the first game right now. And the whole premise of these games is they're basically gamified escape rooms. So the first game, called 999, is basically a Titanic themed escape room, but it's like a bunch of different escape room puzzles that you have to work your way out of before the ship sinks. It's so good and like right up my alley because there's like murder and stuff involved, but also escape rooms and the Titanic. What more could a girl want? It's very good. I'm enjoying it.
What do you have for our listeners, Sarah?
So I had 2 things. I couldn't decide. They're all kind of the same vibe. So I really like social strategy. I like a lot of competition shows. I'm a huge like Big Brother fan and Survivor. And so the show Claim to Fame, which is hosted by 2 of the Jonas Brothers, it started 3 years ago. And it was supposed to be like a very silly show. Like my podcast network that covers reality show was like, this is just a silly show we're going to cover once and then no one's going to talk about it. And incredibly, it is the best social strategy on the air right now. Like there is a lot of innovative like strategies. There's a lot of good alliances. There's a lot of great gameplay. It's like what a lot of these like competition shows used to be back in their heydays. And so it's very great. It's also very funny and camp. And like Franklin Jonas is super fun to like watch. And so it's super great if you haven't started. It's only on episode like 3 right now. So you're right at the beginning of the season. And then also another like social strategy game. I play a lot of Blood on the Clocktower, which is a game similar like Mafia. If you guys have ever played that, it takes like a lot of people in person. But
Oh,
there
okay.
are, yeah, but it's super fun. So a good way to touch grass, good way to get to know people. There's a board game cafe here in town that does 2 different nights of it every week. And they play for like 5 hours at a time, so you can join
Wow.
games. Yeah, there's different scripts, and so like it kind of changes depending on. There's a script that is a lot of mechanical information. So it's like solving puzzles. You figure out like whose information kind of matches with who else's information to figure out who the demon is to kill them. But then there's also games that are just vibes, social strategy. Like there is mechanical stuff, but it's mostly just getting a feel for if someone's lying to you, if they're telling the truth. It's super fun. And I also think one of the best parts about playing these games is that like they're kind of cutthroat. You have to frame people. And so they're usually really good with like good aftercare. Like they're very nice. They know like when to stop the game. It's not what you'd expect from your typical like game people. But there's a lot of thought of like, well, we spent a lot of time lying to each other. Let's like be kind now, say like who did a good thing, say like sorry for, whatever happened in the game. And so it's a nice social vibe, even though you're just trying to accuse people and murder them for hours.
That's
This
awesome.
sounds so fun.
Yeah.
You've
so fun.
inspired me. I gotta do
you
this.
can play online too. I asked in the Millennial group if anyone else played it, so I was like, I would love to have like a Millennial like game of it because there's like an app for it. But then no one else like really had heard of it. So if you've heard of it or you like to play it, go in the group and say we should do it.
Yeah.
I would love to.
That group, by the way, is facebook.com/groups/millennial show. I meant to plug it earlier since we brought it up a couple times today. Well, Dr. Sarah Steelman, thank you again so much for your time today. We really appreciate you. I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future. Thank you for your insight. And again, thank you for what you do for your clients. I mean, you sound like a phenomenal therapist. So
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. I love being on this show. And I'm glad that, my personal soapbox, I posted about it, and then I just get to talk about it for, an hour. So thanks for having me on.
the Facebook group inspires us.
Yeah.
I mean, we see people talking about certain things in there. We're like, well, this is important to fellow millennials, and it's an interesting subject. So let's talk about it. It's our own like personal Reddit community, kind of.
It's a great group. There's a reason why I am only still on Facebook. and it in part is because there's a lot of therapists have like referral pages. And so like Las Vegas has one on Facebook. So I need to be there for work. But I was also like, I can't lose the Millennial group. Like it's really fun.
Aw.
Yeah, it is. It's a nice community we have there.
Such a lovely space.
Pals, make sure you're following the show in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And we would appreciate a review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
To stay in touch with us, email millennialshow@gmail.com or visit millennialshow.com. While there, you'll also find all the links to our various social media channels, so please do give us a follow. Spotify users can also leave feedback directly within an episode, and y'all have probably heard me doing this across all of our shows for these last couple of weeks. Please, please, please follow us on YouTube. We are trying to increase our presence and engagement in that space. We are Millennial Podcast on YouTube. Your follows, your comments, your engagement, your likes on all the videos all helps us, and it's free. So really, really appreciate all of y'all's help with that.
After Dark starts in a moment for patrons and Apple Podcast subscribers. Thanks everybody for listening. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
I'm Sarah.
Bye everyone.
Bye.